What's up, motherfuckers? Agent Madhatt here. Finally, once again, continuing the Cradle of Filth discography review. It's been a pretty decent gap in between Nymphetamine and this one, but I hope that whoever's been watching the discography review will keep watching. It's time to review one that I really didn't look forward to reviewing, namely Thornography. This came off of the heels of their 2004 release of Nymphetamine, which really garnered them way more success. You know, that was one of their most commercially successful albums. Some of the tracks off that album are still some of their most played, some of their most beloved. But as far as this album goes, I'll go ahead and tell you in advance, it's probably going to get perhaps the lowest rating out of any of the Cradle of Filth albums that I've reviewed thus far. The lineup is basically Charles Hedger and James McElroy on guitars, Adrian once again on drums, Dave once again on bass, and Danny once again on vocals as always. Now, don't get me wrong in the fact that there are some redeeming qualities to this album, but even though I'm getting ahead of myself, this album is my least favorite Cradle album. It's an album that the reason I dislike it so much is for one simple reason, is because it's so hard for me to listen to it front to back. You know, and I know there's certain albums that are meant to be challenging for the listener. I get that. I'm a fan of black metal and raw black metal, so I understand, you know, how an album can be challenging to its listeners and how certain albums can be an acquired taste, but I have so tried to like this album, and so far I have failed. I listened to it a couple times today. I've tried to like this album, but I just can't do it. That being said, there are some redeeming qualities to this album. It's an album that I think in some cases gets an unfair shake, but let's get away from talking about that and let's talk about the sound of the album in general. On paper, and just the basic premise of this album, I like. The basic premise of it being experimental, trying to make a Cradle album that's more guitar driven, that brings back some more of the Iron Maiden type melodies, that's a little bit more thrashy and groovy. There are some sections of this album, some glimmers on this album, and some places where this album really does shine, especially with the guitar work on it. The album, one thing you'll notice is that it's more guitar driven, as I said. Another thing you'll notice is that the keyboards are very subdued. Martin Powell is gone, so the keyboards are very much lesser part of the album than you have been hearing for the past few albums. Another thing you'll notice is, you know, the guitar work has more, it's a little more thrashy, but thrashy is kind of the wrong word in some cases. It's more like groove metal. You know what I mean? It's pseudo thrash, if that makes any sense to you. Danny's vocals, he does this thing with the vocals that I just turns me off. There's some, especially on some of the songs, it's that attempting to sing with like a especially on tracks like Libertina Grimm, where he just bellows Libertina Grimm, and it just sounds cheesy. And I mean, I know his high-pitched vocals have been cheesy in the past, but this was one I just don't like. So maybe a track-by-track analysis is in order. Under Pregnant Sky, she comes alive like Miss Leviathan, which is their obligatory Cradle of Filth keyboard instrumental intro. Is neither here nor there. Doesn't do anything to add nor detract from the album. Number 2, Dirge Inferno, which is a pretty decent opener. Forgettable. It's decent, but forgettable. Number 3, Tonight in Flames, which I consider to be the masterpiece of this album. This is where the idea actually really works. It's where the idea is executed perfectly. You know, it has the thrashy doom 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 doom, those riffs in the beginning, and then the very energetic, heartfelt chorus with a lot of twin guitar melodies in the mix. Danny's vocals are perfect. So that's Tonight in Flames. Number 4, Libertina Grimm. I have sort of a love-hate relationship to this track. There's parts of it, that part where the twin guitars are in and it's very atmospheric. I love that riff. But some of the other parts, it seems like they just run that riff into the ground, that Libertina Grimm, doom 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 doom, Libertina Grimm. They just run that riff into the ground. It makes the track seem like it lasts forever. And then from there you go into the Byronic Man, which I don't like it. I just don't like it. It's boring to me. It drags on and on. Number 6, I Am the Thorn, which again has some good ideas, but it's amidst a lot of really substandard songwriting. Number 7, Cemetery and Sundown, which again, it's decent, but forgettable. Number 8, Lovesick for Mina. I have no desire to ever listen to this track again. I will never come back to it. It's not one that captivates me. It's not one that draws me in. It's just a track that's it's decent, but it's meaningless. It's nowhere comparable to anything great that Cradle of Filth have done. Number 9, the other masterpiece, the lesser masterpiece on this track, The Fetus of a New Day Kicking, which is where, as much as I've trash-talked Danny's halfway singing vocals, this is one where he gets it right. The chorus, where the lyric writing and the passion is there, the guitar work is there, it's good. Number 10, The Rise of the Pentagram, once again. It's a pretty decent instrumental. It's a pretty good instrumental. I like the track a lot. Number 11, Under Huntress Moon, again another track that's decent but forgettable. Number 12, Temptation, ridiculous. It just comes off as cheesy and ridiculous to me. I'm sorry, but it just does. I hate to say that. Cradle of Filth is one of my favorite bands, maybe my favorite band of all time, but it's just ridiculous. It's just silly. So that's the track by track. The conclusion summary is the fact that musically and on paper, in theory, it's a decent album, a valiant attempt at experimentation, and I respect them for attempting it. But it fails in the execution of it. The songwriting is lackluster. It's forgettable. That's my main problem with it, is the fact that it's so hard to get through the album start to finish. Even listening to it to try to review it, I wanted to put this review off. Put it off for at least a week, maybe more, because of the fact that it's so hard for me to want to listen to this album, for me to get through it from start to finish. It just seems to drag. They seem to run that repetition into the ground, that chorus, verse, chorus type of motif, where they just run a certain riff into the ground. They get a certain riff that's not that good, and they just run that shit into the ground. And the riffs and sections that are actually decent, they only spend a few moments of a track on that, but otherwise they just run the same riffs, the repetitive riffs that just seem to be the same riff, just in different forms all over the album. And that's about all I want to say about it. It's a decent album. It warrants at least a listen or two. Some Cradle fans might really like it. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Well, that's unfair. I do like it some. I like a couple of the tracks, but it's not an album that is going to be replayed by me many times. You know, last time I listened to it was at least a year or two ago. The only reason I came back to it was so I could review it. So it's not an album that has any sort of staying power with me. Tonight in Flames is a good song. The Fetus of a New Day Kicking is a good song. Dirge Inferno is very decent. But other than that, they're decent songs that are forgettable. And that's my take on it. You might have a different take on it. Any Cradle of Filth fan that is thinking about listening to it, go ahead. I hope that, and sincerely hope that you enjoy it. I don't enjoy it. My score for the album would be about a 57 out of 100. I know that's low, and I hate to give Cradle of Filth a score that low, but that's my feeling for the album as a whole. It does have its moments. It has its shining moments. But all in all, it's possibly their worst release. So there you are. 57 out of 100. Thornography. Peace, fuckers.